Welcome to Voices of Esalen. I'm Sam Stern. My guest today is Magnus Toren, Executive Director of Big Sur's Henry Miller Memorial Library. For the last 3 decades, Magnus has shaped the beloved cultural outpost into a place where literature and music meet the strange and beautiful improvisations of the Big Sur creative community. During this conversation, we explore the enduring mystique of Henry Miller, both as a literary figure and a kind of patron saint of creative freedom, along with Toren's performative spirit, the evolution of the library as a cultural hub, his endless devotion to his wife, Mary Lou, the Big Sur fashion show, and so much more. I know you're going to love this conversation. Please enjoy. What was it that originally drew you to Big Sur and then eventually to that strange gravitational pull of the Henry Miller Library?
It's a long story, of course. I was born. No. I left Sweden in summer of 1977 on a sailboat, and we sailed with the intention of sailing around the world. We took a break from the boat occasionally as individuals, and so I took a break from the boat. From Barbados, I flew up to New York, and in the winter of 1977, and there I met a young woman with whom I had so much fun. We went dancing in the village, and she just blew me away, in part because she was, as it turns out, she was actually from California and had grown up saturated in that cultural shift, or let's say the hippie movement, or the turning from sexual repression. I mean, all those things that happened in the late 60s. She was definitely a child of all of that. And she expressed it in the way she talked, the way she was, the way she made beautiful little drawings and artistic kind of expressions that I had never really experienced like that before back home in Sweden. So I was totally taken by her. And she told me about her parents that lived in Monterey, California. And they had a place where they oftentimes welcomed people who were traveling, backpackers and whatever. And I was exactly fitting that bill completely. So I took her up on it. And I did eventually take a Greyhound bus across the country and ended up visiting her parents. And that was Dana Godby. And Dana Godby is a well-known person in Big Sur, and we are still very close friends. So it's really thanks to Dana that I ended up in Big Sur. So then Big Sur became, I mean, you would want me to say that, it was the mystery and the draw and the drama of Big Sur that made me had this pull, and that's why I came back. That's not true. It was because of her and visiting her and her sister later on that I came back to Big Sur. So Big Sur was just an added benefit to those friendships. Mm-hmm. When I first came to Big Sur and actually stayed, I decided to stay. I, of course, had to fish around for something to do. And I walked into Ventana at the time and said, "Do you have any openings?" And Ventana was then owned by Transamerica Corporation. And Kathy Farmer was her name. I still remember her well. And she said, "Yeah, we have openings. So what do you do?" And I said, I don't know. I do kind of like everything. And I said, what do you think would be the fastest way for me to make money with the least amount of time invested? And she said, "Well, you should be a waiter then. That's definitely the fastest and the easiest." And I said, "Okay, well, then you have to start as a busboy." And I said, "Okay." And then she said, "Do you have a social security number?" And I said, "No, what is that?" And she said, "Well, I'll have to fill in a number for you, so I'll do that." And then I was hired. That was 1984. And so that illustrates a little bit about how things have changed since then regarding, Social Security and employment, the legality, I guess. I was just a hitchhiker coming through and signed up some fake number and got hired.
But did the Henry Miller Library exist in 1984?
Yes, it did. It was opened in 1981 by Henry Miller's good friend Emil White, who I have not found in all my reading about it in the archives and everything any indication that Henry Miller knew or that Emil White knew that he was going to create the Henry Miller Memorial Library out of his own home along Highway 1 then. But
Mm-hmm.
Henry died in 1980, and only a year after that he opened up the Henry Miller Memorial Library with some pomp and opening ceremony, and Sam Farr was there signing this declaration and all that. So there was a real opening of this sort of. It was a momentous occasion, let's say, and that was 1981.
Mm.
And then Emil White ran the place, which essentially then was his home, into which people came and visited and hung out with him, and he told stories about his friendship with Henry, and of course also displayed and showed his own art, which many of us in Big Sur are very familiar with. His peculiar and very, very special, naive style of painting. So that's what he did until 89 when he died.
At what point did you begin to be associated with the Henry Miller Library?
I didn't exactly know Emil White very well, but I had stopped in there, of course, over the years between 84 and 89 when he died. But I don't really have any strong memories, and contrary to what one might expect, I would have been there. I would have been hanging out with him in my abiding interest in Henry Miller. But that's not true. I did not have an abiding interest in Henry Miller. I read very soon after coming to Big Sur, I read The Oranges of Hieronymus Bosch, because of course it's a wonderful book to get some sense of what Big Sur means in terms of the social aspect, like the neighborhoods and the various activities on the coast, which he portrays beautifully and in oftentimes a very romantic fashion. So that's all I knew about, except it's not true. I had also tried to read Tropic of Cancer, failed to read it. It was the cool book to read amongst some of my older friends that I admired when I was like 16, 17, but it was too difficult for me to read. And that's a translation into Swedish, of course, of the book. And then now I kind of have to take back what I just said, because the other truth is that when I left Sweden in 1977, and this is rather an extraordinary coincidence, is that when I left Sweden on the sailboat, the book that I was reading at the very time when we cast off from the dock in Stockholm to sail out into the Blue Yonder, the book I had on my bunk was Colossus of Marusi in Swedish, again, translation. And of all of Henry Miller's books, that would be the one you'd want to read at the commencement of a trip or of a journey.
Mm.
Because in that book, Henry Miller is doing exactly that himself and is loving every minute of exploring and being in Greece, which eventually ends up being one of the inspirations for him to move to Big Sur, is that Big Sur reminds him both the physicality of it, but also the smell, the flora in Big Sur is a Mediterranean, reminiscent of the Mediterranean flora, and the hillsides gushing down into, falling down into the ocean, also very reminiscent of the Greek Isles. He was mostly on Corfu, but he traveled actually around the islands quite a bit, and then ended up in Big Sur in 1944. So I did not exactly know Miller that well. So in 1993, a friend of mine was running it, and running it is a word, but it wasn't exactly, they weren't doing much. The Big Sur Land Trust was the non-profit organization that helped Emil set it up. And they were, on some individuals in the land trust were very interested and engaged, but many others on the board of the land trust were not interested, and perhaps some of them even interested in getting rid of it, because as with Henry Miller all the time, there are always those who frown upon Miller as a person of note because of his notoriety writing about sex in such a boisterous manner that didn't fit in with some people's sense of propriety. Anyway, so there's always that, and so I recognized that nothing is going on at the library. Anyway, I walk in, and this young man who's running the place at the time says, "I'm going to quit." And I said, "Oh, who's going to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know." And I said, "Well, I'll do it." And then after a couple of applications and some other people were involved in trying to get the job, I got the job to be the director 1993. And I think my qualifications were sort of a jack of all trades. I love people. People can tell that I'm a social person in that sense. I'm a reader, so I do have that. No formal education. I mean, I have some, but not literary formal. But also, I think a very big factor is that I had a place to stay. I was stable. I was married, and I lived in Big Sur in a stable place. And as you know, as everyone who lives in Big Sur knows, that's one of the most difficult aspects of working in Big Sur is where the heck do you live, and how do you finance where you live? So we had a great deal, my wife and I, as caretakers. And it was a very stable job and caretaker situation. So that's another reason I think that the Land Trust Board decided that I was the person to do the job. And as it turns out, I can't imagine what a incredible lucky stroke it was for me, because it suited me perfectly, and I had very little to lose and everything to gain at the library, because there was nothing there really. I mean, they did some readings and some gatherings for tea and some little gatherings around Henry, but again, very little.
Was it a bookstore?
No. I mean, there were a few books, but very little. And that's really surprised me, actually, that when I got in there, and there was, I think, maybe Tropical Cancer and the Colossus, the Big Sur and the Oranges, couple of books like that. But I have a feeling they even had those books, and that they had bought those books retail. I don't remember, but it's almost like that, right? So I immediately started running a bookstore, and I remember how elated I was, elation that I felt, recognizing that, oh my gosh, there are so many of Miller's titles that are available for retail, sold, by the distributors across the country. So I immediately started stocking everything that that was available by Miller, which again was quite a lot. And of course, I started intensely reading Miller and reading all the biographies and everything like that. So it was a heady and wonderful period of my life.
At that time, I'm assuming there weren't concerts that were happening at the Henry Miller Library. I mean, it's become famous for attracting musical acts and such, but in that time when you took over in the mid-90s, was there any hint of that?
No hint of that. In fact, there was no music anywhere live except at River Inn on Sundays, with the Jake Stock and the Abalone Stompers on Sunday afternoons. And then Alan Perlmutter brought in Maria Moldauer. I don't know if that name rings a bell with you, but it does ring bells with people my age. She was a well-known Midnight at the Oasis was her hit song. But she came to River Inn, and that was probably one of the very first times that something like that happened in Big Sur. And then for me, what happened was that some singer-songwriter, stopped by and said, "Wow, I want to play here," which is like not exactly, doesn't demand a huge amount of imagination to think that it would be fun to play there. And I said, "Of course, let's do it." And really, that's how it starts. And I still remember that first, I have no idea what his name was any longer, but I remember being so impressed because he brought his own PA, speakers and a little mixer, and I thought, wow, how super cool this is, and a guitar and a microphone, and that's a far cry from a few years later when we had, as you just mentioned, in fact, some of the greatest, some of the biggest in terms of commercial availability or spread, or downloads on Spotify, biggest in the world acts at the library, and that has, of course, also been almost disorienting sometimes how that
Yeah,
all sort of happened.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think back, and I've only been here for 10 plus years, but I think back to some of the shows that have taken place there, whether it's Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Yeah.
um, God, Devendra Banhart. What have been some of your notable memories of acts that have come through?
I think it's again one of those questions that I get often, right?
Yeah,
It it varies in what mood I am when I answer it. But there are these intimate indoor concerts, like we had a couple of Russian instrumentalists not that long ago. Actually, it was one of the most remarkable events at the library. I don't remember their names, but they were brought in by through Lisha Chapelet and her fiddle camp connections somehow there, and she was the one who introduced me to these two Russians. That's an example of, on the one end, which, the intimate concerts inside and outside, the ones that are smaller, maybe 50 or 100 people sitting around, those are on that end of the spectrum. There's such virtue in that. But at the other end of the spectrum, it's also incredibly memorable and impactful to have Flaming Lips playing at the library with, in, I mean, Arcade Fire and Fleet Foxes and those, at that time, they were world-sized bands, right? And they brought their, I mean, Arcade Fire came to the library from Madison Square Garden, sold out 2 nights at Madison Square Garden, then came to the library. So I asked the sound tech, their sound man, their main sound tech, so how much of this stuff did you have at the Square Garden? He said, well, everything really is hooked up here, like it was at Madison Square Garden, except the size of the speakers. So it's really the same equipment, except that. But back to Flaming Lips. I mean, um, I can only imagine how it would have been for someone to come from the south, driving up the highway, starting to get a little nervous. Where are we, honey? It's getting really dark, and there's no lights anywhere, and it says on the map that Big Sur is somewhere in the neighborhood here. We're coming closer, but we've been driving now for 50 miles with hardly anything. It's getting a little scary. Then they see Deechens. You see the little lights maybe into the dining room. And then around the next corner, they turn that corner, and in front of them, it looks like it looks like the landing of the spacecraft in Close Encounters, right?
yeah, it
In
does.
front of them. I mean, it must have been such an experience to see that and then maybe slow down and hear that haunting and sometimes really sort of ambient almost sound from them. And for me that was a moment of actually real joy to see that, and to see the incredible relationship between Wayne Coyne, then, who is the main person in that band, the way he interacted with the audience, rolling out in that ball, and doing the laser show and shooting confetti so that it filled the whole library. It was confetti there for on the grounds for like maybe a whole year. He said to me that, oh, no, it's biodegradable, it'll be gone in no time. That wasn't exactly true, but whatever, it was worth it. So that's the other end of the spectrum. And of course, Sam, as you can imagine, that's just one out of very many. I mean, one more I can mention is when Philip Glass came the first time and
Yeah.
had Wendy Sutter playing the cello. He had his grand piano, and it was of course, we were lucky. There was a beautiful, not balmy, but just perfect evening. And and for them to sit at the library that night, beautifully lit, perfect sound, quiet. I mean, those are moments that are very, very memorable.
Mm, absolutely. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah, yeah.
I think about the fashion show as
Mm.
some of the more memorable evenings.
Yeah, the fashion show started right after fire of 2008, this is a very monumental and very big event. Now, unfortunately, subsequent to that, we've also had some very big fires, but it was the big fire at that time for sure, and it continues to be one of the biggest in terms of acreage burnt, I believe, called the Basin Complex Fire, 2008. And Lisa Gödel is her name, and she is also now the leader of a very successful singing group, singing choir. I don't think is more. I think she's involved in more than one, but she and gosh, I forget her name now. Too bad. She's another wonderful lady. She worked at Fernwood at the time. The two of them conspired to do something about a rising out of the ashes, which they felt was an important thing. So something that symbolizes the rising of the ashes, something that brings the community together in a celebration of renewal. And that's kind of the genesis of it. And I don't know exactly how they came up with the idea of doing a fashion show predicated on the idea that none of the items in the clothing or the things that you wear or carry or bring with you onto the stage can be what's conventionally used for clothing, right? So it's all whatever else you can use. Turns out that duct tape and bubble wrap and a few other disgusting plastic things become rather popular as far as the designs. But there has been the most wonderful designs, as you know. I'm thinking of one of your compatriots at Esalen, Murphy. Michael's son, Mac, thank you. When Mac first, I think it was the first one when he did Bones, and he managed to attach to his body bones, and he had a very minimal kind of skimpy underwear thing that he was just really kind of like naked. But he was dressed in bones, and as you know, he's physically a very impressive character, and that was one of the most memorable early performances at the fashion show, and that was, of course, an example of someone who used nothing that would conventionally have been associated with clothing, and so and that was 2008. The first show might have been in 2009. I don't remember now, but ever since then, it's been every single year, I think with one interruption because of another fire, but otherwise it's been going on.
One of the things I love about it is your introduction to the show in your performances. It seems to me that you've always had a performer's heart. It's pretty clear when you're on stage. Where did that impulse to perform come from in you?
Yeah. I wonder, what the first thing that comes to mind is also that people sort of assume that, oh yeah, Magnus, don't worry about it. He can do it. He can go up on stage and he can do this and he can do that. And it's not exactly true, it's not so easy all the time. I'm not free of self-doubt or stage fright. I don't suffer stage fright like some people do that actually cannot get on stage. But I definitely have it to some extent, and have to really work on channeling, which I've been taught by other people more experienced than I, to sort of challenge that energy and really try to direct it in a creative way rather than letting it hinder you or block your creative impulse. So, and why do you perform? Yeah, that's a really good question. It is, of course, it's vanity, and it's part of it is the feeling of I don't know, like the last one we did when I went out with my wife and who has suffered a stroke. It's definitely a very wonderful gift that we were given, my wife and I, to be able to share the life we now have and the closeness that we now have, despite of, and in some strange way because of the relationship that now is defined by her her inability to use her left arm and her left leg, which means that she needs to be in a wheelchair and she needs to be cared for 24 hours a day. So to go out and express the and it sounds a little too much perhaps, but it's this truth in what I say now, which is that um, the enduring love and the fact that we've been together, not through thick and thin. I mean, you don't want to get into too many details about my life with my wife. It's not been easy all the time. But one thing that has happened is that we have stayed together for 40 some years now. And the length of that relationship and the steadfastness of our love for one another is something that feels really good to share. And in this particular moment, in this particular context, it felt particularly poignant
Mm.
to go out and show that to, I mean, what an audience, right? Because we personally know maybe half of that audience, or at least we are acquainted with them. So it becomes, and like I said, a very blessed opportunity.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was extraordinary. It was touching, and it wasn't maudlin in any
Oh, good.
sense.
Yeah,
No, it
great.
was it was a celebration, and it was triumphant in a sense, and yes, it was this piece, in part about devotion, which makes me think about your relationship too with the library. And you've been a caretaker, storyteller, kind of this priest of Henry Miller Library. Have there been times when you really just wanted to walk away from it all?
No, actually, no. I have always been so grateful for the opportunity to do what I do there.
Mm,
There's been challenging moments for sure,
mm,
and irritations and conflicts a few times, but overall, I mean, it's not easy to run a nonprofit in Big Sur, period, and along the coast. You always have some trials and tribulations, but none of them ever caused me to think I'm just going to abandon this ship. It's too difficult or something like that. It always has been enough inspiration, enough wonderful items on the horizon, projects that needs to be pursued. And again, fundamentally for me, the you said storyteller. I'm also a story listener. I love to listen to people, to their stories, and so if it's not a busy day at the library and I don't have too many other things that I need to attend to, oftentimes I have conversations. We sit down outside or in the couch inside, or for that matter, we stand up by the counter and we have long, long, wonderful conversations, and you know that has been I often think about that and wonder what the hell is that all about. So what, you could say to yourself. Then I forget very quickly afterwards. For them it's more of a memorable experience because it's associated with the one visit to the library. But I think there's virtue in those conversations. There's definitely a gift to be given, to be able to open yourself up to hearing people's stories, and that's usually what it is.
mm,
People ask me about Miller, and then I immediately ask them about themselves,
mm,
and there we are. And my recognition throughout the years in doing that also sounds like a cliche, but it isn't. It is true that every single person um, that you meet have a story worth telling. Some people are really good at telling their own stories. Other people are not, and the people who are not good at telling their stories simply don't get told. The bottom line of saying that is that I know that within every person that stands with me, there is something of interest and of an abiding interest that they carry.
You mentioned Miller, and I wanted to ask you, do you think that the library has succeeded in keeping certain aspects of Miller's spirit kind of alive, Or is it more that it's just become something else, perhaps something larger than Miller himself?
Um, I think that Miller, if you, as it turns out, by the way, talking, rewinding a little bit, thinking about how I got introduced to Miller almost by getting the job, I really am grateful that it is Henry Miller and not Faulkner or Steinbeck or any other of the 20th century big, well-known novelists of this country, because Henry is this iconoclast. Henry is this guy who he's not ashamed to contradict himself, I guess, just like Walt Whitman, but still, um, he is not ashamed of really being very blatantly honest, even though we can get into that on a deeper level and see where there are some gaps in his honesty too. But the honesty that he exudes in his incredibly inspired moments of writing is manifest in his admiration for and his love of other artists, other writers, dancers, poets, philosophers, historians, neighbors. He just really loves sometimes the idea of, but oftentimes also the very immediate reality of relationships with humanity. So he is like a humanist to the core,
Mm.
and a good one, and a compassionate one, and a as it also turns out, interestingly with Henry, is he is staying away from any kind of association with any ism, be it capitalism or communism or individualism or any of the isms that we deal with in our culture. He stands above all that, or beside all that, or beneath all that, whichever. And there's some sort of liberating aspect of that. So all of that conspires for me to say, no, I think Henry is in fact still waiting for it to become even more part of what he embodied as a writer. So, because some of the things that we do are exactly what Henry, I think, would have loved. Henry sits above the fashion show and just is loving it, stomping his feet when he sees that kind of creativity and that kind of community outreach. I think he would have absolutely loved it. He loved the Big Sur review, although he wasn't participating in that. But his at that time ex-wife Eve Miller was instrumental in the Big Sur review. So. So yeah, no, I think Henry eggs us on, and hopefully will continue to. So I take pride in I think feeling that I have Henry done Henry good, and that more people now, of course, millions, in fact, since 1993, has been introduced to Henry Miller through the library. Most people don't know who he is when they walk in, but they find out, and they may continue to read something and look it up. So yeah, I think it's been good.
Oh, I love that answer. Thank you. And I like how you touch upon his honesty, his
Yeah,
shocking honesty. When I think of some of the most outlandishly honest writers, I think of Charles Bukowski,
yeah,
somebody who you love because they'll say that thing. Miller, who else would be there? Mailer, perhaps.
yeah.
Is it difficult to balance the library's role as sort of a cultural hub with what I think of as a deeper or more literary, quieter identity as a library slash bookstore?
Yes, that's a really good question. Because it's kind of been not the Achilles heel exactly, but it's been something that's I've been feeling remiss in or inadequate with over the years. And that is, we started doing an archival work back in early 2000s, And thanks to a couple of young women who came from Smith College at the time and started the series of interns that came to the library. And thanks to them, it started several years of having interns. And those interns were coming to primarily do just archival work and cataloging what we have or what we had. Well, actually, we still have most of that. So there was sort of an academic ambition behind that. Then in 1998, the Henry Miller Library bought a collection of primary source material of Henry's that we now call the Emil Schnellock collection or Emil Schnellock archives. That collection is now considered by all of the experts in the field to be second to UCLA, the most important collection of primary source material of Henry Miller's in existence. So we have had this collection for a long time. And we've never really, well, it's not true actually either, but it's been slow, let's say, to catalog it, to make it properly available to people who would be interested in that kind of academic depth. And there have been a few over the years, but we have not made noise about it, in part because it hasn't been cataloged completely. In the last several years, we've had a doctoral, he's now actually a doctor of literature in France. But throughout his doctoral work, he has been coming to the library to help us catalog and organize better than before this academic or archival part of the library. So, in fact, the library can put a very big sort of feather in its hat for having saved the Emil Schnellock collection back in 1999 or 99, I think it is. We actually got it. Because had we not bought it then, thanks to our nonprofit status, thanks to some generous donations from some good people who saw the value in saving this, and when I say save it, I mean, had we not bought it, the seller would probably have split it up into segments and gone out and sold them piecemeal at auctions, in this case, around the world, because Henry Miller's name, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps is more current in Europe than it is in the United States. So auctions would have happened in London, in Paris, probably in Geneva or wherever. So that didn't happen. Instead, this is one integral, incredible collection of some of the most important letters that Henry Miller ever have written. In fact, I would actually say, perhaps with the exception of his love letters to Anais Nin, these would be the most important letters in a broader sense also than love letters, because in these letters he is pouring his heart out to his boon buddy, Emil Schnellock, and he writes these letters on the last piece of paper that he can afford and sends them over using the last centime that he has in his pocket in Paris to send it over to his friend, because some days he felt that what he wrote now would be important for the future. And, little did he know that we are now talking about it in 2026 and being very excited about having it properly cataloged and made available. So it took a long time, but in the end now we're dealing with these archives, and I might as well ramble on here if you don't mind. This Schnellock collection has recently, the library board has decided that we are in fact going to sell/donate, depending on the funding here. We're still going to hopefully make it available, and we're hopefully going to raise some more funds to cover the cost for the Henry Miller Library and having saved this collection. We're not going to, capitalize on it, but we would like to get most of our expenses reimbursed, because our idea is to return this collection to where most of it was created, which is Paris. So we have been in negotiation now with the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which is the venerable one of the oldest libraries, you could say, in the world. And they have literary collections of great importance. Obviously their own literary heroes are all in there. But when we presented to them the opportunity to maybe transfer this collection to them, they were very, very excited.
Mm.
So they're coming up with some funding, and we are planning on going over to Paris in 2027, most likely, to transfer this literary archives to the Bibliothèque Nationale, which for me is going to be, I mean, I hope I can be part of that and go there with that collection and be part of the celebration that we're going to have in Paris doing that transfer. And being proud of, again, the fact that we managed to safeguard and save this collection, and then eventually put it in a place where it's going to be very much appreciated and accessed by anyone who would want to access it, along with them also promising to do a significant exhibition of some of the more visually and otherwise interesting items from this collection at the time of our transfer.
Mm.
Yeah.
You mentioned hoping that you'll be there. Are you considering curtailing some of your activities within the realm of the library?
Yeah, well, I have the new life, that I now live with my wife. That I have like a 24-hour caregiving situation with her, and it's difficult for. I mean, right now we're having tremendous help from our neighbors, so it's all working out okay. But to be 24-hour caregiver, you do need some breaks, and I do get some breaks. And actually, the Big Sur share. It sounds perhaps like a minor thing in the overall context, but it's such an incredible thing to get some meals from the Big Sur share every week. It's just a great help. But that's the situation, and if my wife doesn't get much better, then or if we stay in this situation, then I am going to have some challenges that way. Right now, I am able to run the library from behind the scenes a little bit and work on projects such as this one and other things behind the scenes. But the library is now running pretty much without me. I am very rarely there. I hope that changes, but at this point, it probably will be this way for a while.
Mm-hmm. And are you still programming the events that come through or the musical acts?
Yeah. I do that together with Mike and Dana and now Daniel, who is now working there. I mean, we all collaborate, but most of the requests, of which I get many emails, people who want to come and play or do something, and so I guess I'll be the first arbiter for whether we are going to pursue something or not. And you can imagine, Henry Miller Library has become, like you mentioned earlier, a sort of famous for having had the extraordinary acts. So many people are just chomping at the bit to come to the library and play there. So we have a lot of. On the one hand, it's a wonderful, but on the other hand, it's also sort of a testimony as to how many people there are vying for the few spots that there are in the music performance world or realm. It's a whole new. I mean, we'll talk about that some other time, but it's a
Sure.
whole new playing field now because of Spotify and the whole
Yeah.
online scenario. So, but anyway, yeah. So I do that, and the workshops and the fashion show and all these things are probably, hopefully, going to be able to continue.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was you started your own podcast, the Big Sur Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that. Tell me about why you wanted to and how it's been in your 117 episodes.
Yeah, right. Well, I first of all, it's a very big, important distinction. It's not the Big Sur podcast; it's a Big Sur podcast, right? So, I don't claim to be the one. I hope that others will do similar things and associate themselves with this community of ours. But that's the genesis of it. I mean, I had this series of interviews that I did under the persimmon tree, we called it, because we have this beautiful persimmon tree, and I had many local, I was going to say dignitaries, but people known, including the manager of Esalen at the time, sitting at the chair next to me in front of an audience, and we discussed their life and their relationship to Big Sur. And that was very, very, very successful. I did it for, I think, 2 seasons. And then at that time, the podcast scenario had started, but baby steps, things were in its infancy. It's amazing how quickly things change. But and then so it was kind of a no-brainer, right? I mean, it meant that this is really fun. I love to talk to people, like I just mentioned, and hear their stories. So why don't I do this and put a microphone on them and try to put it in just kind of like you're doing, I mean, this is one of the things that is underestimated when it comes to people think about podcasting as this immediate thing that you consume and throw away. That's not how I see it. I see it as an archival. I see it as, I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of people that have listened to a few of the podcasts in Big Sur, and my podcast, or the A Big Sur podcast, hundreds of people who have listened to episodes that are now 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
They sit there, you can scroll down, or you can search the name of a person. And so there's such a value in that, I think. So I have been occupied, unfortunately, in the last several months here now, but I think I'm going to start up again with new episodes. And I'm also actually now a little bit challenged because I am thinking of separating the podcast into 2. So there'll be one A Big Sur podcast and another one that I don't know what I'm going to title yet, but it'll be more Henry Miller and Miller Library centric.
I like that. And I like your conception of the podcast as archival. And that's
Yeah.
also how I have thought about Voices of Esalen, which we have about over 250 episodes. It almost doesn't matter like how many people listen to it now. And it
Right.
is a wonderful exercise in archival preservation. Yeah, it's just fantastic. I love it. I'm like you. I like listening to people, and I like getting to know people across
Yeah.
the context of an interview and such. When you think of your legacy, Magnus, what do you hope people remember about your time, your contribution?
Yeah, I wonder what if I die tomorrow, what will they say at my memorial, if there even was one, if somebody took the initiative to gather together at the library and have a commemorative event for Magnus, what would people say, and what would the testimonies be? I really don't know. I think some people would probably be expressing gratitude for me having held steadfast at this cultural institution at the library that have been giving the community a space for so many years. So I think that would be perhaps the most straightforward and positive memory that I hope I will leave behind. And then, like we all do, we try to do our best, right? And I don't know if you recognize, we are recognizing that all the time of each other or in each other. But we all carry the wish to do, yeah, I was going to say, to do unto others what we want to do unto them. And we are fallible in that, and not always successful. But I guess that's really the only thing I hope people would remember, is that, yeah, he tried to do good towards people and help as much as he could, pretty much at all times. And he received people during his time in Big Sur often his reception style was shorn. I wish people said this. It may or may not, be always true, but that's what I strive for. I receive people shorn of prejudice at all times, always receiving people with the attitude of knowing that within that person's heart lies a beautiful human being. So those are the thoughts that come to mind, Sam.
One thing that I notice about you is that you are a person with an artistic sensibility, just so deeply ingrained, the sense of a performer, a sense of a host, and the sense of sort of like a beacon for other people's artistic expression. It is so deeply ingrained in the person that you are that other people can't help following suit. There's an artistic graciousness to you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So Magnus Toren, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure to get to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm honored to be part of the Voices archives. I'll see you if not on the road at the post office for sure.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Esalen. Today's show was produced in conjunction with Shira Levine. Our theme music is by Nico Holloman. Until next time, be well.